So thank you everybody for sticking up with us today. It's been a great 2 days, and this afternoon we're going to have 3 more speakers. This time we're going to take it from a legal perspective. Erin McCladdy is an attorney who has worked in the corporate sector for Fortune 500 companies and has decided to take her skills more towards the non-profit side. So she's left the law firm and set up her own practice and has been helping nonprofits now for about 2 years. So thank you very much for your attention. Can you please put your hands together for Erin McCladdy? Thank you.
Thank you. So I've like I said, I've been, or like you said, I have been actually working with nonprofits for several years, but I've been having my own firm for 2 years. You're fine. So I'm actually going to talk about nonprofit governance today. It's everybody's favorite subject, so I want to make sure everybody's paying attention and can listen, because I know everybody came to hear about nonprofit governance, I'm pretty certain. A little bit more about me. So I'm an attorney. I started corporate with some Fortune 500 companies and did that for a little while, but throughout the duration of it, I actually started my career with the Museum of Fine Arts, which is one of the largest museums in the country. It was a phenomenal experience, but what I learned is those organizations don't have any problem getting resources, right? It's the ones who are in the field, on the ground, just hitting the pavement, that have a hard time finding the resources, people who want to help them, and then being able to afford those resources. So that was really passion for what I do. I say I help drive purpose-driven people further, and I do that a variety of ways. I help them organize their thoughts. Community leaders come to me super excited. They've got 800 different things going on. Their business plan is 500 pages, and it's like, whoa, let's meditate, bring it back a little bit. Organizations actually want to start, but they're not sure where to start. I work with them, and then I work with people who have actually started, but need some capacity building. So like I said, today I'm going to talk about governance, going from good to great governance. And hopefully you won't fall asleep, because it's talking about tips that dreams are made of. We've had some technical difficulties, so hopefully this works. All right, we'll just click on it. So generally when I encounter organizations, this is the look they have on their face, right? It's the same look you have when you buy the Clerg or the Slurg couch. You know, the DIY couch that you can put together. It's really neat looking. It conceptually is a good idea, but you take out all the pieces and you're like, what have I done? This was a terrible, terrible idea. Just a momentary lapse. And the reason why they have that look is because oftentimes their roles look like this. So what I'll do is I meet with people and I say, well, what do you do? This keeps popping up. I say, well, what do you do for the organization? They say, well, I'm a master builder, I am an interim executive director, I am the treasurer, and I drive the buses for the field trip, or just something like that. It's entirely too much. And the reality is, for most organizations, they have to do several roles. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But in addition to the several roles, they have to do fundraising, they have to do networking, client development, donor development, and you have to know trade compliance, legal compliance, tax compliance. It's completely overwhelming. So what else has in blue? Well, the organization isn't running as well as it could or should be running. The board members aren't showing up to board meetings. When they do show up, they're not getting along. The individual contributions are down. And there's a variety of reasons why that happens. One of them is just there's not enough time. Like I said with the scribbles, you have like 800 different things that you're doing. You can't sit down and necessarily find out all the information that you need to know, and it makes sense. And to that point, what I find really interesting is there's too much information. If you Google nonprofit governance, you come up with 23.3 million results in 0.5 seconds. 23.3, just nonprofit governance. No one can do anything with that. It's impossible. So people become overwhelmed. And then lastly, they're unsure of what the problem is. So I know my board members aren't coming to the board meeting. But why is that? Is that because they're not engaged? Is that because the time of the meeting? Is it because we're not serving wine? Because wine seems to be a big draw for a lot of board members. There's a variety of problems, but they're unsure of what the problem is, and so they don't necessarily understand or know what the next step should be. And then the resources that are out there that do help you diagnose the problem, figure out steps to remediate it, that you have to have a title loan to be able to afford them. And I'm sure you guys have seen the resources that you're thinking, if I could pay that, then I probably wouldn't be coming to you to begin with. But that seems to be the reality of the situation. But I tell organizations, there's another way. Outside of hearing nonprofit governance and completely shutting down, outside of Googling your way through and trying to figure out what it is and what to do and putting a system in place, there is absolutely another way. But in order to understand what the other way is, you have to understand what governance is. And this is really the first mistake a lot of organizations make, is they just don't know what governance is. And it makes sense, because what happens, you have academics that take the space over, you see it bandied about everywhere, there's webinars on it, there's textbooks on it, there's classes on it. But fundamentally, governance is the decisions you make about how to run your organization. That's really all it is. The decisions you make on how to run your organization. And so when you think of it that way, it's really just a strategy. And if I'm going to have a strategy, if I'm going to tackle a strategy, then I have to have a plan. And for that reason, what I tell people is I don't like to use the word governance, because people just go to sleep, they log on to Candy Crush, they do everything other than listen to me. So what I'll probably be saying is just governance and operations interchangeably. So I may say governance, parentheses, operations, but that's why I'm saying that's because governance, people just shut down completely. Oh, by the way, so I have my hashtags here. I have the hashtag for the event and for my firm, EMP LLC. If you have any questions you don't feel comfortable asking now, or things come up later, feel free to tweet me. Just use the hashtag. I'll have my handle later in the presentation if you want to do that too. But if anything comes up, anything resonates with you, if you want to share, I know Victoria's been talking about going to social media. You're more than welcome to use that handle. So in terms of the better approach, if you have a strategy, you have to have a plan. A better plan is use your tools, laser in, and do the work. You have to approach governance, operations, the same way that you would approach that clerk couch. The best way to put it is, what happens when you handle the clerk couch off the cuff? It's an unmitigated disaster. You have screws everywhere, there's things that you didn't use that you were supposed to use, it's wobbly, you're screaming at it, it doesn't look safe. It's a complete waste of time at the end of the day. And the reason for that is because you attached it ad hoc. If you use the instructions, really if you can understand the instructions, because typically they're in hieroglyphics, but if you use the instructions, typically you save yourself time, you save yourself resources, you save yourself a little bit of sanity. So what I'll talk about today is using your tools, lasering in, and then doing your legwork. And fundamentally, what I want to get across is that you can improve your operations. You can put in place a plan for your operations on a restricted budget. You don't need a $1,000 suite of software. You don't necessarily need a consultant to start doing these things. You don't need a class from one of the local universities to start doing it. Those things help you build capacity. Those things help you grow in an effort that you've already started. But the biggest mistake I see organizations make is they wait, because they say, I don't understand it, or I need to understand it better, or I need someone to guide me through it, and so that they don't get around to it, and it never gets done. And even when they do take the class, they don't implement it, because again, that momentum and that action hasn't been put in place. So that's what I want to carry across, is to just do something, and you'll find it's a little easier than you think. So in terms of tools, so why do tools matter? It goes back to the fact that we have a plan. We're trying to attack with a plan. And two things happen when I use tools. Either I can identify when one aspect of my operations isn't running as well as it could be, or I can identify when one aspect of my operations could be running better. Either way, these are fundamental in developing a plan, in implementing a plan, and making sure that your operations run efficiently. There's a couple of ways to use tools. My favorite is information gathering. So there's a couple of different tools out there. There's Feedly, there's Digreader that's out there. And what they do is they aggregate your blogs that you can log on. I have like nonprofit law blogs, fundraising blogs, Beth Cantor is a big one, a bunch of different blogs that I log on to, and I just scroll and see what's going on in the space. This allows me to do several things. I can benchmark against what other people are doing, I can educate myself, and I can train. So use things like that. Pocket is a great one, and they call that a virtual bookmark. And basically what happens if you're on Facebook and you're scrolling and you're just killing time like we all do, and you come across something that you say, oh my God, this is actually relevant and useful. I should probably read this. It's on fundraising or something like that. You can just click the pocket icon. It saves it to your little folder, and you can read that. You can read that later. So using tools like that, using news tools like Flipboard, Newser, Trove, and I'll give this presentation, so don't feel like you have to write all these down. But using things like that, again, are ways to benchmark and see what your colleagues are doing, to benchmark and see what the industry is doing, and to see what the agencies and other legal entities are requiring that you do. So other things you can do with tools, now I'm thinking about it, is you can create a home base. So another big mistake that happens is inefficiency. Inefficiency is just a killer of trying to implement some type of plan for your operations. And if you have a home base, like our CRM friends in the back that have a functionality to aggregate all your contacts, and that was an unpaid for advertisement, you're welcome. And then you have other things like project management software that's out there. Those are wonderful for boards. So when you want a space to, I'm not sure why it's doing that. When you want a space to upload files, when you want a space for board members to chat, you want a space for communicating, giving them an email. It's an amazing tool that you can use that really kills several other problems people have in their governance programs, in that they don't allow their board to talk, they don't know where their documents are, no one really understands what's going on. It kills that. So use your tools to create a home base. Use your all-in-one tools to make and leverage the resources you have work a little bit easier for you and be more cost effective. And then lastly, your tools don't necessarily have to be technology. They could just be your habits and your behaviors. So inefficiency is one killer of a plan in your operations. Diversion is another. So I know we've all been in the meetings where the board is talking, we're deciding on napkins for the gala that's coming up. Someone says, I want to use pumpkin spice orange. Somebody says, I want to use longhorn orange. Oh, my son went to Texas. Oh, did he go to Texas? My son went to A&M. Then an hour later, the meeting has gone nowhere. You've got 20 minutes to go through 50 items on the agenda, and everyone looks exhausted. And usually by that time, the food is run out, so they're really uninterested in staying at that point. Anyway, so that's another killer. And so when you have that, use consent agendas. Have it ahead of time that you decide, okay, we're going to talk about napkins on the consent agenda. We'll agree to it. We don't have to dedicate actual meeting time to this. Save yourself the heartache of having to go through that situation. And you can also implement the timing mechanism. So maybe we say we're going to spend 10 minutes on this item, we're going to spend 30 minutes on this item. There's always that one woman that likes to bark that's wonderful for keeping time. We have a Susie on one of the boards that I work on, and it's amazing for her because she can time and she's like, shut up, just stop it, we're done, talk about the next thing. So when you have that person who likes to bark orders, it's an amazing role for them. But again, it's another way to create urgency, to move your meetings along, you avoid the diversion, again, using your tools to further what you're trying to do. Laser in, so you can't be everything for everyone, right? You have small staffs, you can't do everything that you want to do. You really need to prioritize what is it that is important to us. Another big issue with organizations is they try to do everything. Let's focus on our gift policy. Let's focus on our board. Let's focus on our volunteer recruiting. Let's focus on our internal controls. Let's focus on, branding. When you have a staff of 3 and one's your husband and the other one is your sister, you can't focus on that many things. And it's a valiant effort. But really, what I need to be thinking about is, who am I? What do I do? Who do I do it for? When do I do it? And how do I do it? So a perfect example of this is, if I'm a theater company with a volunteer box office, then my focus is probably going to be cash. So I really want to focus on internal controls. That's going to be my priority. And there's a couple of benefits in lasering in. One of them is, and I'm sorry I keep looking, but I want to make sure that little pesky thing when it comes up, I get it. One of them is you monitor. So if I'm focusing on internal controls, I can actually make sure that I'm progressing in the actions that I'm taking to do the internal controls. I can get feedback. I can review. I can do assessments. I can involve my board and my staff and my volunteers. So maybe my board, I get them involved by having them work the box office. Maybe my staff, I have them do a workflow for us so that we can see how the box office should actually run. And then my volunteers, we can say, hey guys, can you come up with your frequently asked questions? And then we can have a sheet up on the website, or we can just hand a sheet out to our volunteers circumventing any questions they have. Because the biggest thing with fraud, it actually is unintentional in many instances. Now, negligent fraud is a little bit different, but a lot of times what ends up happening is people just didn't know. And there's a lot of things we think is common sense, but sometimes common sense ain't so common as what my grandma would say. And so if you have the frequently asked questions that people can run through, then you circumvent a lot of issues that come up with organizations. So laser in, and then once you've lasered in, keep it on people's radar.